Hi friends, hope this finds you well. So I wanted to talk quickly about the Australian Strategic Policy Initiative, which is they say they are an independent, non-partisan think tank that produces expert and timely advice for Australia's strategic and defence leaders. Okay, well, firstly, I don't think there's really any think tanks that are independent and non-partisan at this point, if there ever were. And this looks like, this Australian Strategic Policy Initiative looks like it's, I'd be interested to see if the National Endowment for Democracy, which is a CIA front, they've actually sort of admitted that the CIA used to do covert things, now it's kind of up front. And so, you know, the National Endowment for Democracy actually is behind a lot of the regime changes that are happening. Like, for example, they're funding the Hong Kong protests. Usually the National Endowment for Democracy is somewhere behind there.
We're here on Capitol Hill at the Longworth Building for a gathering of the National Endowment for Democracy, a group that has been involved in spawning regime change around the globe. This is a taxpayer-funded organization, mostly funded by the State Department as well as industry groups, that aims to topple socialist governments by funding opposition groups, opposition media, and civil society. It's what you might call meddling in other countries' affairs.
And I would say that this Australian Strategic Policy Initiative is probably has some backing for the National Endowment for Democracy. I've been trying to get a hold of Ben Norton because he's a journalist from the Grey Zone, and he might have some information about this think tank, but I haven't been able to get a hold of him, unfortunately. But if anybody knows how to get a hold of him, I'd really like to know if they are in some ways connected with this. And when you have a look at the Australian Strategic Policy Initiative on their website, it has these big ads on the right with of Lockheed Martin and Thanes, or Taines, I'm not sure exactly how you pronounce that. Taines is T-H-A-N-E-S, is a defence contractor in Australia. And Lockheed Martin, of course, you probably know if you follow this channel and follow independent journalism, that Lockheed Martin is a huge weapons contractor, and they love it when there's war and they get to sell more weapons, and they love it when Trump runs out of bombs, when that they love it. So when you go to the front page of this ASPI.org.au, there you see Lockheed Martin, their logo, and Taines right there. So I imagine they love this think tank, and I would imagine, having such close ties to Lockheed Martin in particular, that there is some sort of a very close tie to US neoconservative think tanks that love war as well. Like, I'm sure the Atlantic Council is in there somewhere with connections to there, etc. And when you have a look at, I was watching a short. I don't usually watch mainstream media, and that includes the Australian ABC, the Australian Broadcasting Commission, because the ABC has become as propagandist as the Murdoch press in Australia, and they regularly put out even the programs that I used to value, like Four Corners. They've all gone by the wayside now, and they all put out CIA talking points about countries like China and Russia, etc. And they are putting out now anti-Chinese propaganda by the bucket loads. The Four Corners is, and so I watched this ABC program, and it had one of the people from the Australian Strategic Policy Initiative, a younger man whose name escapes me right now, and I thought, oh, this is interesting. This whole program of the ABC is sort of anti-Chinese propaganda, basically saying that China is trying to it's trying to sort of take over basically the state I'm living in, and and trying to influence elections and all this sort of thing. Well, yes, to a certain, every country, every government tries to, in some ways, to interfere. Governments just do that now. But the thing is that there's this compartmentalization of China's economic interest it's just part of this capitalism. China is becoming this major economic power, or is a major economic power and is overtaking the US, basically. And the US doesn't like it. The US loves capitalism except when competition is beating them, and then it doesn't. That's why it complains about Huawei, because not only is Huawei whooping its behind when it comes to that technology, mobile technology, etc., but it's also having Huawei and is being involved in 5G, and but also the NSA and the CIA, they don't have the same ins into Huawei to surveil people, to surveil the public, that they do with other operating systems. So that's also something that the US is complaining about. Of course, they don't say that, but that's why they hate Huawei. But anyway, so basically the US hates, is sort of vilifying China because China is overtaking them economically. And as I said, capitalism for the US is fine as long as they're sort of dominating and dictating around the world. But when somebody else starts being competitive, which is what capitalism is supposed to be, but it isn't really. It's usually monopolies and duopolies dictating to the public. The choice is actually less in capitalism, and also it's more and more exploitative, and it has little to do with anything that's trickled down. But so the US, that's one of the main reasons that they are so anti-Chinese at this present time, and they're trying to get every other country that in the West to be anti-Chinese as well. That's what they're doing right now in Australia. And the government, no matter what party, the government that's currently in there, which is a wannabe fascist government, Scott Morrison government, they're quite happy to trot along with whatever the US wants. It's like, the US says jump, and our government says how high, and it doesn't matter what party is in. It's either the Labor Party or the coalition. At the present time it's the coalition, but the Labor Party is the same way. They basically do whatever the US wants. If the US says, okay, Juan Guaido is the leader of the self-appointed leader of Venezuela, so Australia will go, okay, we recognize Juan Guaido. If the US dictates that Janine Áñez is the leader of Bolivia, the recent US-backed right-wing coup that happened in Bolivia, if the US says Janine Áñez is now the leader of Bolivia, I'm sure that the Labor Party and the coalition in Australia will say, sure, that's fine, we'll recognise her. They have no spine, no offence to invertebrates, they have no spine, they just go along with whatever the US wants them to do. So anyway, this I'm getting off the track here, but what I'm saying is that the US has instructed Australia and other Western countries to vilify China for reasons that I've mentioned, and they're doing that quite happily, and our mainstream media here, including the Australian Broadcasting Commission, is also doing that too. And so when I saw the Australian Strategic Policy Initiative guy speaking on this program, and I'll show you a little bit of it.
What the national security agents do, obviously, is a matter for them, and I'll be guided by them. And in fact, it's their judgment as to what they may or may not brief me or any other Tasmanian officials on.
States don't really have expertise in foreign policy, intelligence work, or security, and this makes them quite vulnerable to influence and manipulation in these areas.
They were talking about how Tasmania basically has a lot of trade with China. Tasmania is the state I live in, and how we also take a lot of Chinese students at the university here in Tasmania, the UTAS, and they sort of are afraid. In some ways, they're just doing this yellow peril thing almost, sort of fear of being taken over by the Chinese. It's kind of crazy because like 10 or so years ago, Australia is, welcoming the president of China, and there's, didn't seem to be any problem, but the US says, no, you have to have a problem with China now. And everybody turns around like a school of fish and goes in the direction that the US wants them to. It's so sad. You can almost guarantee when you see the mainstream media in Australia or elsewhere in the world, the Western mainstream media, like the Murdoch press and the like, if they start to focus on a particular country and the problems of that country, it usually means that the US wants to overthrow that country, the government there and invade or something like that. You can almost guarantee it. It's like a little signal that that's what's coming. So so it gets very tiresome, you know. It gets very tiresome watching this happen. And, you know, it's that ASPI is about as non-partisan, it's about as independent as the Murdoch press, or, you know, it's about as independent as the Democratic Party. I mean, it's the US Democratic Party. It's kind of just I would say, a propaganda arm of the this think tank is a propaganda arm of the US imperialist, white supremacist national security state. I'm not a journalist, so I don't have any sort of evidence of that. It's speculation, but and that's why I'd like some independent journalists to sort of look into that, because we don't have any fourth estate here that does any sort of real digging, you know, to find out about these issues. We don't have anything remotely like the Empire Files, or you know, or the Grey Zone, or Black Agenda Report, or anything like that. We don't have anything that's really you know, looking into the corruption and the goings on. And the closest we have to that is the Juice Media, which is a satire group. I mean, they make satirical videos, but they have a lot of information in them that's actually exposing corruption and political bad behaviour, etc. But we don't have any real fourth estate here anymore in Australia. So, but I'm guessing just by looking, even just when I opened it, I just couldn't believe it when I saw Lockheed Martin and Taines. I think that's how you say it, Taines. These big weapons manufacturers. I thought, there you go. That tells you a lot about them. So, and I'm sure at some point they'll be carrying on about Iran. If we need, you know, if the US continues and they're trying to get some sort of coalition of the willing, or whatever they call it now, to invade Iran, I'm sure that we'll join in on that. I think I think Scott Morrison may have even said that he would join in on that already. So, see, you know, we don't have any. Iran hasn't invaded anybody. The US has overthrown, you know, 50 plus countries since World War II. It's murdered 20 million to 30 million people since World War II. And yet, here we are worried about Iran, who, you know, that country really isn't threatening anybody. So, you know, there you go. So, you know, we're just sort of like just a vassal state of the US, really. And it's so sad. And it would be great if somebody did a report on this Australian Strategic Policy Institute and really looked into what's going on there. Because we need to really have uncovered the amount of influence and that the US imperialist national security state has in our country here in Australia. Because I am so sick of all these wars that we're participating in, where these countries have not threatened any of us in the West, not at all. And here we are just going in on lies and for resources. I mean, look at what we've done in Australia, just endorsing Juan Guaido, who's basically a traitor to his country, Venezuela, and who's quite happy to invite the worse than the mafia, the US, into there, and to basically make most of the people in Venezuela really poor again. When Hugo Chavez had actually dragged people out of poverty in the time that he was in there. And Maduro has made some mistakes, but he's sort of going along that way as well, trying to help people not, you know, take them out of poverty. And here we have Juan Guaido trying to cause a war, trying to get the US to invade Venezuela. I mean, what kind of traitor is that? And the same in Bolivia. They're actually massacring. There's a US fascist coup that happened, US backed, and they're massacring indigenous Bolivians. And, you know, and where is the condemnation in Australia? There's nowhere. Albanese, the leader of the opposition, the Labor Party, no condemnation. You know, you wouldn't expect it from Scott Morrison, who's a wannabe fascist, but this is where we are in Australia. So anyway, if you know anybody who's independent journalist, and you can contact them and get them to look into this Australian Strategic Policy Institute, I'd be very grateful. And please leave comments in the comments section. So thanks so much for watching. My name is Trish Roberts. Hope to do more videos in the autumn and this winter, when I don't have so much to do here. And if you're watching from Real Progressives or Real Progress in Action, I was doing a lot of videos on Real Progressives, but they've actually got a tax deductible status now, so I have to put more of the political content on their other page, Real Progress in Action. I'm doing most of my videos on Real Progress in Action now, which has only it doesn't have as many members as Real Progressives. So if you're on Real Progressives, please also join Real Progress in Action if you're interested in any content from me or anybody else from Real Progressives who might have to swap over to Real Progress in Action. I'll leave a link to that. And that's really all I wanted to say. And also, if you're not vegan, please check out my vegan playlist and please think about going vegan. It's a moral imperative for so many reasons, and so please think about it and check out howtogovegan.org. Okay, so my name's Trish Roberts. You're watching Faint Signals from Vega. Please subscribe if you haven't already. Click the notifications bell, otherwise you won't receive notifications when I drop a video. Click the like button if you like the content. Till next time, bye for now.